Welcome to the Quit Vaping Podcast, the podcast designed to make you a non-listener. In this show, I'm not going to scare you away from a life of vaping. What I am going to do is show you just how good your life can be without it. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the Quit Vaping Podcast, guys. The only podcast designed to make you a non-listener. But here's what I realized. After doing this podcast for a year and taking about 6 months off, I'm really excited to be doing this every single week again. I love doing this podcast. It's so fun. It's so exciting to me. It's just like a wonderful place for me to just kind of tell you guys what's going on in my life while also giving you some little bits of information here and there that are really helpful. So I'm happy to be back. I hope you guys are happy to have me back, and we will be doing a new episode every single week. And just so you guys know, moving forward, I'm going to start doing episodes like I did last week with testimonials, success story episodes. I'm also going to be doing episodes with other experts in the industry, okay? I have a lot of coaching friends who work with a lot of different substances and different niches, and I'm really excited to get people on who are experts to talk about all this stuff. And what I want you guys to know is, although this podcast is designed to make you a non-listener, I really do mean that. Just because you learn the tools here doesn't mean they can't apply to other areas of your life. Remember, I'm a life coach, guys. I love helping people quit vaping, right? I really do. It's amazing work. It's all emotional work. It's all thought regulation work. But remember that the reason I teach these tools to you and the way I teach them isn't really just about quitting vaping or creating a relationship where you're managing nicotine. It's about creating a life that is amazing on every dimension and every front, okay? So although this is the Quit Vaping Podcast, it extends just quitting vaping, and these tools really can be applied to any area of your life, and you're going to be seeing this time and time again as I get other coaches on, other success stories. So stay tuned, and welcome to episode number 56. All right, today we're talking about nicotine not being your enemy, okay? Nicotine is not bad, but before I get into that, I just want to give you some updates about my life. So it is currently July 27th in 2024, and I have lived on like this apartment completely by myself for the last 2 years, and I'm moving next week. I'm actually moving back into my parents' house for a little bit, and I know you guys are like, oh my God, a life coach moving back into his parents' house. Yes. You know why? Because business is freaking expensive, you guys. And I have spent over $35,000 on my business over the last 2 years, and I'm still surviving, and I can actually afford to live on my own still, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to move back in, and all the money I would have spent on rent, I'm going to use to invest into paid ads for my business. So get off my back, Sherry. Okay? Get off my back, Mike. I don't want to hear it today. Yes, I'm moving back into my parents' house at 29 years old. And you know what? I'm going to refuse to have any shame or guilt about that or make up any stories about that doesn't serve me. So boom. There's some thought work for you. And that's what I'm doing. And also, I've been saying no to a lot of things lately. So I'm actually starting this list. It's called The Year of Saying No. And it's kind of like a spin-off of Shonda Rhimes' book, The Year of Saying Yes. I don't know if you've ever read that, but like there's a whole bunch of things on this, right, in pop culture, like Yes Man with Jim Carrey. Have you ever seen that movie where he says yes to everything? Well, I'm actually learning that as you continue to develop and become the best version of yourself, you actually have to go through this period where you say no to practically anything that does not serve the journey that you're on. And nobody talks about this, by the way. So I think it's just an interesting way to do it and frame it. And I'm going to keep track of all the no's I've had to say. And just to look at my phone for some examples, recently, I said no to going to a bachelor party that was over the weekend in Tennessee. It looked so fun. I said no to having this guy come visit me for a couple days for my last weekend in the apartment. It just didn't feel aligned with my goals and my future. I said no to going to a vacation with my parents this upcoming September because it's going to be like 3 or 4 days completely removed from everything I'm trying to work on. And I'm saying no to living alone, even though I can afford it, because I want to spend all that money and time and energy on my business. So there's some things for you. There's my update. I know that was kind of a long intro, but you know what? That's all good. Now you guys know more about me. It's vulnerable. You know about my life. And as excited as I am to be around my family and my grandpa and my mom and my dad, my brother, it's going to be a lot, and it is a sacrifice, even though I'm very, very fortunate and privileged to have the opportunity. I am saying no to the freedom that I really enjoy living alone. So as you continue to listen to this podcast, you'll keep hearing updates about my life. And you guys shouldn't be shameful about any spot in life that you're at. You're in the right spot. How do I know? Because that's where you are. So don't allow anybody else's journey or judgments to become more important than your opinion about yourself and your growth and your goals. Okay? With that said, let's talk about nicotine today, not being your enemy. Here we go. All right, guys. So I grew up in a household that was very much pro nicotine. Okay. But it wasn't from my perspective. Like when I was like I remember my earliest memories of being able to think about smoking. I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and I remember my dad went outside and it smelled gross, and then he would cough, and I used to think that smoking was like the worst. And what happened was from like ages 4 to probably 14 to 15, I like demonized cigarettes. Okay, I learned from a young age because here's what happens, right? I love my dad, but my dad had to be my hero. You know what I mean? Like when you're a kid, your protectors, your parents, they have to be your heroes. All right. You cannot believe a story where they're not the hero, or else you literally are shaking up the entire foundation of your own security as a child who needs them to survive. I know that's kind of deep, but just be mindful that a lot of the beliefs we have about our parents growing up are kind of like fictitious, and we blame other things, not them, for having their own weaknesses, and that's a survival mechanism, okay? So I grew up learning how to demonize cigarettes. From today's perspective, as a 29-year-old adult, I can see that cigarettes are not the problem. Nicotine is not the problem. My dad has the thought and emotional work to do around addiction, and that has nothing to do with nicotine. But anyways, as a kid, I learned to demonize nicotine, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have this experience, especially if you're in addiction now. You're probably angry at nicotine and blaming vaping or cigarettes, whatever your jam is, but we're here for the vaping, right? Or Zen pouches as being like the negative, right? Here's what I want to say. Nicotine itself is a completely neutral substance. And you can actually use nicotine, just like any other substance, in productive ways. Okay? So if you want to change your relationship with vaping, whether you're here to quit for good, which this podcast was founded on the whole quit for good premise, but I'm changing that as I move forward. I think you can have a healthy relationship with any substance, okay? And you might be like, well, what's a healthy relationship? I define a healthy relationship with nicotine as having no dependency issues. I don't need it, okay? I'm not using it to avoid negative emotions, okay? Because I think that's an unhealthy relationship. It's not creating any results in my life that I don't want. And it's not damaging the relationship I have with myself in any way, shape, or form. That means I don't feel guilty about it. I don't feel bad. I'm not doing things I wouldn't want to do. I'm not ignoring my higher self to keep using the substance, okay? So you can have a healthy relationship with any substance. And I'm saying that right now with a cup of coffee in my right hand, okay? I do not drink caffeine very much anymore, but I've been using it recently as a way to reward myself for doing things that are difficult. I said no to going to Pride tonight. I said no to going to my brother's house tonight. I'm literally going to sit home in my apartment for the day. I'm going to work. I'm going to the gym. So I figured as a reward, I can get myself a cup of coffee to help me motivate myself throughout the day. Healthy relationship. I'm not having 4 cups a day like I used to be doing, literally 4 cups a day to a pot, right? I don't need it. I'm not going to tell myself the story that I can't focus or concentrate without it. It's something I'm using as a reward. It's created no negatives in my life today. And if it becomes a problem where I'm drinking 3 cups a day, I'm going to have to do some work on myself, okay? Caffeine is not the enemy. Nicotine is not the enemy. Alcohol is not the enemy, okay? So with that said, we don't need to, at least from the way that I teach it, ever declare ourselves powerless to a substance, because that gives a substance way too much credit, okay? If you are using a substance like nicotine and it's become a problem in your life, the reason that substance has become a problem has nothing to do with the substance and everything to do with the thoughts and the emotions we have surrounding the substance that are making us want to use it. Now, I understand that people are here like, hey, Andrew, wait. Nicotine's addictive. So there is a chemical thing going on in your body. I agree with you. But remember, the way that I teach it, there's 3 addictions, all right? There's the mental. That's our thoughts and beliefs surrounding the entire substance, ourselves, where we believe nicotine fits into our lives, where we believe we'd be without nicotine. Okay, that's the mental addiction. There's an emotional addiction. That means the reason that we're using any substance, it doesn't matter what the substance is, it could be like social media even, is because we want to change how we feel emotionally, okay? And then there's finally the chemical addiction, which is obviously that nicotine is addictive, right? So although that does play into you continuing to vape, it's not what brought you to nicotine addiction to begin with, and it's not the real problem. I promise you, nobody has ever died from nicotine withdrawal symptoms. They might be uncomfortable, and I will say that last November, I quit coffee. I was drinking about a pot a day. I didn't realize until I started paying attention because it's just such an ingrained thing, right? Coffee's fine. It's so normalized in society. I think like half the world drinks a cup of coffee every single day. It's like a ridiculous statistic. So it's so ingrained, right? But I went off coffee last year in November. I cold turkeyed after doing a pot a day. And I went through some pretty serious withdrawals, like pounding headache in the back of my head. Really bad insomnia. I had issues sleeping. I just had a lot of things going on. But what I will tell you is that most of what I was going through, other than the headache, was emotional withdrawal cravings, okay? So I just want to say, if you're using a substance, do not give credit to the substance or its chemical reaction in your body for why it's so hard to quit. Although that's a factor, it's a much smaller factor, especially regarding nicotine, than anything else. I understand that there are substances like benzodiazepines, I don't know if I'm saying that right, benzos, and alcohol that actually do have like life-threatening withdrawal symptoms, but nicotine and caffeine are not one of those, okay? So just be mindful that most of what you're going through when you quit has nothing to do with the substance and everything to do with our thoughts and our emotions going through that withdrawal period. So when it comes to nicotine in your life, especially if you want to drop it for good, or if you want to create a relationship where you can use it casually, like any other substance that is possible for you. It might not be possible readily today but it is a possibility for you, because I currently have that relationship with nicotine where if I want to go to a cigar bar every once in a while and have a cigar night, that's not a big deal. If I'm at a bonfire and somebody has a vape and I want it in that moment and I check in with my body, my mind, and everything, and I'm all good, I can hit it and then just drop it, just like a cup of coffee, right? Then you have to learn to manage the thoughts and the emotions around it, and it has nothing to do with the actual chemical substance. And if you give credit to the chemical for being evil or bad or so powerful that I can't overcome it, you're missing the point and you're giving away all of your power, okay? I promise you, in the entire history of every single person in the entire world who's ever used nicotine, nicotine never used itself or brought itself up to our mouths, okay? We did that, and we had to use our brain to do that in our body, okay? We always have control over our brain and body, and if we don't think we do, it's actually an awareness issue that we don't have awareness over the actual thoughts and the emotions going on in our head and our body, and that's always the problem, I promise you. So the idea of nicotine replacement therapy is that I'm going to use nicotine to get off nicotine, and that's built on the premise that nicotine itself is the problem, okay? Nicotine is not the problem. And what I want to say is, if you want to use nicotine replacement therapy to get off nicotine, that's fine. It does work for some people, but just be mindful that even if the nicotine replacement therapy works, the reason why it works in the long run is because you've intentionally changed your thoughts and beliefs about where nicotine fits in your life. If you ask anybody who quits vaping successfully, I promise you that you'll ask them what they think about vaping, and they will tell you thoughts that do not come from a nicotine addict's mind. It's that simple, right? It really is that simple. But if you want to create a relationship that's healthier with nicotine, you have to also do the emotional work, okay? So the reason why, like, I don't know if you guys have done Alan Carr stuff before. Alan Carr is great because he literally just teaches you to change your thoughts about nicotine. Well, he doesn't really teach you that, though. He just forces you to change your thoughts. He's like, here's an entire book about like 15 foundational beliefs about nicotine, and I'm just going to repeat them every single line until they're so ingrained in your mind that those pop up whenever you have a nicotine craving, all right? It's an effective way to do it. But what he's not teaching you is the skill set of changing your beliefs. He's just doing it for you, okay? The reason why I teach this the way I do is because it's not just about quitting nicotine or creating a relationship where it's not a problem with nicotine. It's about learning the skill set of actually changing your belief systems, and also the skill set of getting into your body and feeling your emotions, because your emotions are guiding every decision you ever make. So somebody who's not connected to their emotions is not connected to what they really want in life. And that kind of person ends up creating a life they don't want and then blaming outside people, even though they just need to learn how to listen to their emotional guidance system that is always guiding their way. So although Alan Carr is great, he has a completely different mission than me. He just wants people to quit smoking and vaping. And I get it, right? That should be the mission of this podcast, but it's not that. My mission is to teach you how to regulate your own thoughts and your emotions around your life. It's a much more meta skill. It's a much more important skill. It's a much more valuable skill that will teach you so much more than just quitting nicotine. And if you're currently believing that nicotine is a problem, you're missing out on that entire skill set behind nicotine addiction, okay? So stop seeing nicotine as bad or negative, because it's not going to serve you. And that is taking literally all the power you have and giving it over to nicotine as if nicotine is this powerful. Like, have you ever watched the Power Rangers movie with Ivan Ooze in 1995? You guys watch this damn movie. The Power Rangers, I forgot what it's called, but just type in 1995 Power Rangers movie. There's this villain, his name is Ivan Ooze. And like, that's just what I think of when people say that nicotine's a problem and they're like, oh, it's so hard, nicotine's so bad. That's what I think is like, nicotine's Ivan Ooze. And it's like, stop doing that. Stop demonizing and creating a villain for nicotine. It's not bad. Alcohol is not bad, right? Porn is not bad. It's just the way that we use it is bad or good depending on the results it's creating in our own life. And this is the thing. When there's no enemy to tackle, this is how we do this work as coaches. not necessarily in the clinical world. This is what I like about coaching. Let me just go on this tangent, is that coaching takes a non-clinical lens to mental health, okay? And that means that we don't diagnose. Obviously, I can't diagnose. I don't have a license, but I don't even want to. The reason I became a coach instead of a therapist, truly, is because I never wanted to ever work with a diagnosis in my entire life. And unfortunately, if you're a therapist or a counselor and you want to work with insurances, you pretty much have to diagnose, which I think is a fundamental wrong way to do mental health. So coaching just made a lot more sense to me, okay? There's nothing wrong with therapy or counseling, and it actually helps a lot of people, and it's a beautiful first step. But if you want to go and like create an amazing life where you're like the badass bitch in charge, you've got to learn how to manage your mind around this. And this is not a therapy skill set, okay? The reason why I like coaching so much, especially in the frame of addiction, is because we don't need to demonize. We don't need to say there's something wrong. We don't need to clinically pathologize anything, right? You have an action you're taking that you don't want to be taking because you don't understand the roots of where that action is coming from, okay? It has nothing to do with nicotine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Like, you don't have an addictive personality or a gene. You don't even have a diagnosis, okay? I'm very intentional about not letting people diagnose themselves as a nicotine addict, okay? Or get diagnosed. Because the moment that we put a diagnosis, there's something wrong with us and there's something to fix. There's nothing wrong with you if you're using nicotine and you can't stop. You just don't have the right tools. Nicotine is not evil, and you can have a healthy relationship with that substance like any other substance of the world. And also, if you learn how to manage your thoughts and emotions around the substance in the way that I teach, it's going to improve your life in so many different ways. Suddenly, you're going to have a better relationship with yourself because you're going to stop believing negative thoughts about yourself. Out of nowhere, you're going to stop eating as much food because you're going to know how to sit with cravings from an unconditionally loving place without shame or judgment. Suddenly, your relationships will improve because you're going to be able to set boundaries and mean them because you have a newfound respect for yourself because you get to decide what to think, believe, and feel about your life. Okay? But we have to take a foundation of stopping to make anything evil or bad. There's nothing wrong. There's no evil. We're looking at this completely neutrally. You're taking an action you don't want to be taking. Let's figure out the roots of that action. Let's solve for the roots. And guess what? Your life gets better on all these fronts. And then eventually, maybe in 2 or 3 years, or maybe in a year, or maybe in 5 months, you decide, hey, you know what? Nicotine, it's not all that evil. It's like I have a cup of coffee every day. Well, sometimes I want to go out to a concert and I'll hit a vape once or twice. And you know what? Because I'm the kind of person who's built this relationship with myself, who can manage my thoughts and my emotions around a substance, I don't need to ever tell myself that that substance is more powerful than me ever again. And I get to create whatever relationship I see fit in my own life with whatever substance I choose to use. Okay? Holy shit, that was a good episode, huh? Anyways, I love you guys. You was kind. You was smart. You was important. I am glad to be back. And you guys, there's going to be some freaking juicy episodes coming up. So stay tuned. And I am doing this training once a week. It's like a 90-minute training. At the very end, I make you a really, really discounted rate to join my course in my community where we can learn and apply this stuff together. And remember, it's not just about quitting vaping. Okay, it's about using the same skill set to build a life that's really amazing. And vaping is kind of just the faceplate I use to teach this material. So I will be taking you way further than quitting vaping if you work with me and join my stuff. That's the whole goal anyways, right? Vaping is just a beautiful starting point. So I'll see you guys on the next episode. I'm really excited to have more success story episodes coming out. I've already got some recorded, and I'll see you on some episodes with coaches because we're going to have some amazing, life-changing, industry-leading conversations on this podcast. You guys are amazing. I'll see you next week.